So it's a little after 10:30. The next step in our advisory committee meeting was going to talk about program statistics, and I'll say right now, if you'd rather look at these online, I fully understand that there may be different things you might be doing with your time, so we do not take it personally. But I do think it's interesting to look at trends, to look at trends and see kind of what the data is, and particularly because I want people to suggest other things we should be looking at. We have this data. We ask you to fill out all of these forms and provide us with information that we should use more often. And also we should use to ask questions that the regulated community has. So I would put out there before we go into all of this, that think about the forms that you fill out, the information that we provide, particularly as they come in through the transmittal forms, because those are the easiest stuff to get. It doesn't require reading reports and doing additional data entry. Think about how we should be looking at the program, both to show how well it's doing, but also to identify things we should be doing differently or shifting our focus to things. So with that, I'm going to hopefully try to jump back to my presentation. I'm not sure if this is what keeps screwing me up. And I'll share my screen. Okay, so here we are, program statistics. I don't know if you saw the Q&A. I'll move that out of the way. Many, not all, but many of these, and I hope to expand it in the future, are on this webpage, Making Progress Cleaning Up Contaminated Properties. You can Google it. It's probably the easiest way of Googling that title. But when this is up, there's the link there. You can go directly there. You can also, I always find this page by going to the advisory committee page. And down at the bottom of the advisory committee page, there's a link to this. Notifications come, sites go, and we have the running tally. Notifications, we count everything since 1985, and we've had almost 54,000 notifications come in since then, since the beginning of the program. The data is all there. You can look at and count how many came in since the new program in fiscal year 1994. For the closures, we are counting numbers from the time of the new program, since we had RAOs and now permanent and temporary solutions. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there, notifications versus cleanups, but over 40,000 sites cleaned up over the years. And the overall trends are going down, and I hope that's a good thing. Since in the last 10 years or so, since 2009, 2010, it's been relatively flat, ups and downs. The last couple of years, 2020 and 2021, probably because of the pandemic and the decrease in economic activity, that probably led to slight drops there. So it looks like we're holding steady in the notifications and closures. And the gap between the two has to do partly with not all notifications require separate closures. As you know, some RTNs get combined, and we only count that once as one closure for simplicity's sake. So if nothing else, within that gap between notification and closures are daughter RTNs that have been grouped together, and also things like adequately regulated sites that that get notified to us but do not require a separate MCP closure. So I'm not particularly concerned about the gap, but be aware it's there and that those numbers will never completely match up. Whenever you do these statistics, it's important to kind of acknowledge that the numbers never add up entirely and that a little fuzziness around the edges is fine. We're not going to the highest level of precision here. Our notification categories, particularly the 2-hour notifications dropped a little bit last year, 72-hour kind of holding steady, but you can see the variations. Most of the majority of the notifications are 2-hour, and that has.
Excuse me, Paul, and you're once again locked up here, and you're not moving screen. Sorry.
Oh no! I'm going to give me a second. I'm going to just quickly reboot, which actually just takes a second. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. And I think I'll be back.
He appears to be completely frozen now.
Now I hope
Oh, there you are.
are you seeing the screen or not?
Same slide as previously
Which is
the total notifications.
it moving?
No. Would you like me to?
Yeah, could you take control and then, well, why don't you take control entirely and share your screen, and then I'll just talk to it.
Okay.
There. Oh, perfect. This works well. Sorry about that, everybody. But like I said before, there are going to be screw ups, technological glitches. Notifications. Next slide. Is that we talked about that. Oops, nope. Go back to the permanent solution ones. Total closures. Always happy to see the permanent solutions with no conditions being the highest. We like that. One caveat with that, of course, is that a lot of those are the simple spills that get completely cleaned up and go out. So it's not quite as complimentary as it initially looks, but with the majority coming out of permanent solution with no conditions, only a relatively small amount with conditions, and then temporary solutions. Next. So this is a new slide nobody has seen before, including Liz. But I was since I was playing around with the BWSC 104 form the other day for soil volumes, I thought it would be interesting to look at self-declared brownfield sites. And a reporter had asked a question about this, so it was interesting to see. On the 104, there are questions there about whether the closure, whether the site had significant redevelopment or changes in use, whether it was considered an abandoned or underused property, aka brownfields. That's the way the form reads. Whether it had received brownfields incentives. I would just assume that that would include EPA grants, mass development grants or loans, and brownfields tax credits as well. And then the covenants not to sue. So we're running about 3 to 4% of permanent solutions with no conditions are considered brownfields, and that's probably like I mentioned before, a lot of the 2-hour notifications are not going to be brownfields. Nobody's going to call them a brownfields, and that's a large number of our percentage of our permanent solutions with no conditions. But about a quarter roughly of the permanent solution with conditions are considered by the regulated community as a self-reported brownfield. And since we always have trouble categorizing sites as brownfields, we can look at who receives funding, we can look at who calls themselves brownfields, but everybody wants the ultimate brownfield list, and we always have trouble coming up with that. So this is another way of looking at it, who self-reports as brownfields. Next. The other thing that we're always concerned about is timing and who takes longer to clean up than others. So I think there's a lot that can still be kind of dug out of this. This is the first level of analysis, which is we have a 6-year deadline for people to achieve an appropriate endpoint. And there are obviously ways that can be extended, but the expectation is to try to get it done as quickly as possible while doing a good job. A lot of the sites, and this is broken up by notification category, which I think is important because clearly 2-hour notifications get cleaned up really quickly. That is expected. Those are the sudden spills, and more than 80% are cleaned up within 1 year, and 98% of them are cleaned up within the 6-year deadline. But it's good to see that the 72-hour notifications, the underground storage tanks, the petroleum sites also have a relatively quick turnaround, and even the 120-day notifications are more than half of them get cleaned up within a year. And what we see going out into the long term are a handful of the 72 and 120-day notifications, but the ones that we see taking a long period of time, and that's partly because they've been in the system for a long time, are the old dogs of sites, the pre-93 sites, where we typically only heard about the worst sites, and those would be the more complicated sites, the larger sites. And since they have been in the system the longest, they're the only ones that have had the opportunity to close after 25 years. So you see them out there hanging out. But overall, I think it looks like the way we would want it to look, and this chart doesn't change drastically from year to year. Next slide. We also look back at the last 6-year time period to see more specifically how things are going. 81% of the sites that came in fiscal year 2015 have closed with a permanent solution. Another 12% are the permanent solution, temporary solution not required. Those are the duplicate RTN, the daughter RTNs that are folded into the primary RTN. Those are also the adequately regulated sites and some others, URAM notifications, that sort of thing. So combining the two, 93% really are where they should be. Another 1%, so make it 94% have temporary solution or remedy operation status, which are also kind of appropriate regulatory endpoints, if you want to call it that, for the 6 years. 4%, they're still working on it. They're in phase 4, they're in phase 5. Some of them are still in phase 2 with extensions, but they're making progress. They're still in compliance. And then the one that we kind of always look to is, how about the people that are out of compliance? And that's been holding steady at about 2% of sites year after year, which I think is pretty good. I mean, considering that many of our sites are abandoned properties, many sites have, the PRPs have financial inability, which is acceptable. So that the enforcement terminology, that might not be the best. They're the ones that are not making progress for whatever reason. And it is not necessarily to say that we're taking active enforcement actions against all of those, but they're the ones that have not met their requirements. And that's with a universe of about 1,200 plus sites releases that came in that year. Next slide. First time we've looked at this going back even further in time, back to sites that came in 1991. How are they doing? And far fewer sites, 624 before we had reportable concentrations. So these are some of the more old dog sites. And what I find surprising is still 80% have a permanent solution. People are still working on them. We've had 29 permanent solutions come in since 2014. So that's what, a couple percentages there. 5% of temporary solutions. The permanent solution, temporary solution not required. That's a smaller fraction than we see these days, but that's because they're these are some of the mother RTNs. There was fewer chances to be a daughter RTN back then. Interestingly, most of the enforcement category is down really low. Basically, the people that are working on it are working on it. And a lot of them are just kind of old dogs that are taking time. So that was interesting. Next slide, I have one more version of this. Question about homeowner fuel oil notifications. And my understanding is that there's going to be a hearing in the legislature on homeowner issues. And I encourage anybody to kind of participate and follow that. But kind of with that in mind, was interested in looking back over time for those sites that we have identified as homeowner fuel oil notifications, what has happened to them. And frankly, I'm kind of a little happily surprised by this, that a large majority, more of them have a permanent solution than our typical site. And I think part of this is that number two, fuel sites over time kind of are perhaps somewhat more manageable than maybe some of the old hazardous material sites. But also I think it partly reflects the effort that DEP regional staff put in to work with homeowners and try to guide them through the system and to help out probably more than we do for the typical PRP. And I think this shows on that. Small fraction are permanent or temporary solutions not required. That typically doesn't come up in this situation. And the unable to conduct cleanups, and that includes the financial inability, I think, in this case, and I changed the label to reflect that. We do have the homeowners with FI, and we work with them as well. And that's kind of the problem, continues to be the problem group that we're concerned about, that people that do not have insurance that covers the cost of cleanup and do not have the funds for cleanup. That's where the problematic cases are living for us. And we do spend more time than with other PRPs on this. But I was happy to see and surprised that 96% have a permanent solution. Next slide. Trends in AULs, they go up, they go down. The jump in AULs this past year in percentage, you'll notice the absolute number at 91 is not significantly different from, say, FY17 when they were 89. There's some variability there, and I think last year's was in the realm of the variability. The percentage jumped up, and I think that's partly because the total number of notifications went down, particularly the 2-hour notifications, the road spills, the sudden releases, and they don't typically have AULs. So I think the increase in percentage is more a function of the drop in those 2-hour notifications, the simpler spills that get cleaned up as a permanent solution with no conditions. So I think that's a statistical anomaly that I'm not worried about unless it kind of continues for another couple of years, and then we have to figure out what's going on. Next slide. Audits, not surprisingly, audits, over the past, several years have stabilized pretty well. There was a drop last year, particularly in the number of level 2 and level 3 audits, and that has a lot to do with the inability to get out and do site inspections. So overall, that's the drop is understandable, and as we get back out into the field in the coming year, we'll see that rebound kind of. It doesn't need to rebound very far, but I think you'll see the purple and the green values increase there as well as we start doing more site inspections. Next. IRA approvals. This is a reflection of the number of just IRAs going on out there overall. kind of the trend from kind of 1999, so the last 20 years has been going down, which I guess is a good thing. And it's not their IRA approvals. It's not to say that we're increasing disapproval or not approval of IRAs. These are basically what is coming into us, the number of IRAs actually being conducted out there. So next slide. It's interesting. I'm not sure what it shows. Similarly for the RAMs, this was broken out by region. RAMs have maintained there rather than going down. And as you can see, the Northeast region has the line in the upper part of the chart. Not surprisingly, a lot of the economic activity, a lot of the development activity, a lot of just the sheer number of sites are in our Northeast region, and that's reflected in the RAMs as well. And that's it. So quick view of statistics. I'll always be interested if you guys have any suggestions about what to look at. That would be interesting. And particularly, we kind of stakeholders would be in a better position to ask kind of the more difficult questions that we might not think of. So always suggested. Thank you, Wendy. In the chat, there's the NBC 10 piece on homeowner home heating oil spills. NBC 10 has done a series, several pieces over the last couple of years on homeowner spills. A couple things about that. One is, they certainly have at times been critical of DEP or of the process, which I think is probably fair. They've done a great job of, I think a really good job, actually. I've been impressed by how well they've presented the issues, particularly of that homeowners face with spills, and particularly the role insurance plays or doesn't play in many of these sites. So I would highly recommend these, and I think they have had an effect. DEP sends a report to the legislature every year on homeowner spills and insurance coverage, and last year, which is the most recent publicly available report, we're pretty sure it's tied to the NBC 10 pieces. We saw for the first time a jump in insurance coverage, where previously we had seen a steady decline. So that was very encouraging. So it's good to see press coverage like this. While sometimes it may be painful for those of us at DEP, it has had a measurable positive effect in the percentage of homeowners covered by insurance. There's a question issue. So note from the chat, surprising that the IRA approval number is a bit lower in the past 2 years, despite emergence of PFAS as an issue. Yeah, but so many of our notifications are driven by kind of economic activity. So in the last year, certainly during the pandemic, kind of it skews everything a little bit. So we can dig deeper into that, perhaps. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Anybody want to open up your mics and just talk? Or are we ready to leave?
Paul, we might have some raised hands.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. We have.
Isaac. Oh, let me see. Isaac, did you have another?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I was just returning kind of to the soil management topic, and I was wondering, is it within DEP's purview to potentially, getting back to what Jeff had discussed, how DEP was not interested in having landfills permitted, would they be able to potentially permit a facility that would be like a reclamation facility, but for soils greater than RCS2, that does not accept solid waste, but is solely for the filling of remediation waste, that wouldn't really be subject necessarily to all of the provisions of a landfill, but maybe able to do that sort of thing under an administrative consent order. I myself am aware of a few properties and people that are in the soil and kind of waste management realm that have 20-acre plus parcels that would consider that form of redevelopment, potentially with installing a solar farm or something of that nature on the top of it once it was shaped and graded. But they're having that same issue of the stigma and the issue with getting the permitting of a landfill. Would waste site cleanup be able to issue a consent order for a facility that would take solely soils that are remediation waste, with, of course, some form of engineering controls to protect groundwater and the like, and obviously setting limits as to what the facility would be able to accept. And then would there be some degree of enforcement or liability protection for the developer of such a facility?
Okay, a lot in there as well. As far as using the ACO process for it, first I'll say it's all, I would say everything is on the table at the moment. So what I'm about to say, which is maybe a little bit of a downer, is just my first take on it, but it doesn't mean it's off the table. First take on it would be that we went the ACO route for the reclamation soil facilities, partly because we had direction from the legislature as part of an outside amendment to the budget that specifically gave DEP authority to create these facilities via regulation or some other form of approval. So I think that process we felt comfortable with, one, because we were dealing with soil that was not contaminated soil. And two, we had a legislative mandate to do something specifically about the quarries and other big holes in the ground to do that. So here, I think we are talking the fact that it is contaminated soil, which that poses different challenges. And it's not as clear a mandate of why we would go outside the existing structure that's there. Again, those are challenges. Those are my first impressions. Those are things I think that would have to be overcome. And I think that kind of approach would benefit from kind of, if not a legislative mandate, then consensus among different agencies and regulated communities, municipalities to go down that route. So, and I would push back again, and I'll just say this, that I don't think the DEP solid waste program is against permitting landfills. But I think that's my perception may differ from everybody else's. So I recognize that it is out there, but I would push back against that. But I think the concept of a monofill of soil for soil and dealing with monofills, soil monofills in a manner that is different from MSW, I think has promise of being able to kind of create that consensus that what we're talking about here is unique and different. And the existing landfills would benefit from having this material diverted away from it if there is a safe and appropriate place to put it that would extend the life of landfills as well. So I think there are a number of benefits of doing that if we can all agree on kind of what the technical and regulatory or procedural requirements would be that would make the towns and the town residents or city residents, could be cities as well, feel kind of safe and accepting of it.
Marilyn,
Maryland, yeah.
Not related to the soil stuff, but just a comment on the slides and the presentation on the data. The brownfield stuff was an interesting way to look at stuff that we haven't done before. I think going way back to your first slide, if there's a way to look at the data in terms of environmental justice communities, I think that would be helpful information to have. And I don't know if there's a way to tease any of your annual reporting data out by EJ community, or if it even warrants modifying a BWSC form or two to start getting some indication of the EJ community status for our waste sites. I think that would be an interesting future look at things.
Yeah, I think there is. I think there is a way to do it now, because the EJ communities are mapped and we have the coordinates for the sites here, at least at some point in the process. We have relatively good longitude and latitude, so I think we can make those connections. It does mean pulling the GIS people in to help, so it's not something that we can do on our own, but I think that's certainly manageable. And then putting something on the forms is another additional way of doing that. But yeah, I think making that connection would be a good whole series of analyses to conduct. Once we make that connection with the GIS mapping of the EJ areas, then you can begin to ask a whole bunch of other questions. Beyond the simple how many sites exist in these areas. If nothing else, it would be interesting to break that. How long does it take to clean up sites chart into EJ areas versus non-EJ areas? Is there a difference in that? You can see it working a couple different ways.
Yeah, what struck me initially was the residential fuel oil cleanups. I wondered if that had a difference, whether it was an EJ community or not.
Yeah. Well, with the residential fuel oil, it's the big thing there, and not to say it's not big for other sites, but clearly it's money. If insurance doesn't pay, then it's hard to get the money together for that, and that's where most of our financial inability applicants come from. So doing more with the FI pool is also another area we can look at for that. Where are they located? Are they in EJ areas? But even if they're not in EJ areas, the bottom line is you can be facing severe challenges in even the wealthiest of neighborhoods, and there are people that live and work there that might have environmental burdens, might have economic or other challenges that it's for an individual, it doesn't matter if you're in an EJ area or not, if you can't afford to pay for a cleanup. Yeah,
true.
So, anything else? Okay, well, in that case, we can head out. Thank you to all who stayed. We're down to 29 attendees out in the audience, plus the panelists. Thank you particularly to all of the advisory committee members for your time and your thoughts for helping the program improve. And
well, thank you as always, Paul and Liz, all your work.
So office hours, fourth Thursday of the month. Well, at least let's go October. Fourth Thursday of October is the next one. Whether we do it on Thanksgiving Day or not, we'll see how dinner is going.
Huh.
Okay, so good seeing you all. Thank you for coming, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.